The moment that it would have some sort of hiccup, you lose everything and you really don't get the save. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ghost from ghostmusic.com, and you're listening to the Dev Room Podcast, where we discuss everything and anything dev related. Right before we get to the show, let's hear from our sponsors. If you like the Dev Room Podcast, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Ghost's Music, as well as like, subscribe, and comment to show your support. Thank you. So for the last month, I've actually been using the new Apple M1 chip within my Mac Mini. And I was actually very surprised about the performance that I actually got from it, especially using very intensive programs such as DaVinci for editing, Blender 3D for modeling, as well as Unity for game development, as well as some other programs, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But for what I got, I actually have to give kudos to Apple, and I thought never in a million years would I ever actually give Apple some praise, but surprisingly, that chip is very, very powerful with a couple caveats. And we're going to discuss those now. One of the main things that I've actually found out about the chip is that if you have software, especially because I use the JetBrains whole library, I use all the programs. If you have programs that are actually utilizing the M1 chip, that chip, mwah, it is fantastic. However, if you do have programs like I use JetBrains Writer, is not optimized for that chip. Before the updates, it was hot garbage. I actually had instances of it actually crashing and not saving files because of the crash, because it would have to resync itself from Unity and Writer. They work in conjunction. The moment that it would have some sort of hiccup, you lose everything and you really don't get the save when it actually goes through all of that. You have to force quit everything. There has been a couple processes where I've been working on something, waiting for it to sync back and forth, and I lose everything, and then I have to start over again. There's been many instances where I had to start maybe 3 or 4 times doing the same amount of code just just to make some sort of headway. Being a game developer and trying to finish up products and finish projects, it's not a really good look. After the update, I have generally not seen not one, and I'll say it again, not one of any of those issues, except once. The only issue that I've had so far since the update was a very rare instance of my machine actually locking up, and I don't know what was happening. I think it was in between processes. I didn't utilize all of my RAM. I didn't use 100% of the processor. Something I would call it a fluke. I wouldn't actually prop it in here, but I do, for the sake of fairness, want to add that. However, even before the updates, using DaVinci, using Photoshop, using Lightroom, those sort of tasks, even 3D modeling, I really had no problems with it. It handled itself very, very well. Even having all those applications open at once and really never giving it any breathing room, it was perfectly fine. The only issue that I see is that it actually wants to prioritize which ones go first. Obviously, if you have the application open, it wants to take all those processes, put everything to sleep that's in the background, and have just that process working. And once or twice, it tries to utilize the program that was sleeping and basically forget about the foreground application. But again, after updates, I've never seen that happen again. So I'm just going to call that another fluke. So after the update, I actually have not seen any sort of performance hits or anything of it. And I came from using my MacBook with an i7 in it, one of the older generations. However, that was a powerhouse. And going into it, I saw a couple of reviews and I was very hesitant about getting the M1 chip. I didn't think that it was actually going to be powerful enough. I didn't think that Apple would be able to make a processor as good as Intel, even though I'm nowhere near an Intel fanboy. I stay with Team Red for life. But I really didn't think the M1 chip would be powerful enough to actually be running any of these processes, as well as being able to keep up with my workflow. And I was, again, very floored. I really did not think that Apple could keep up with it. I know that a lot of people have raved about the iPhone, and I think it was the A12 chip or the A11 chip that they had created for the iPhone, saying that those chips were very powerful and they can do whatever they wanted to do with them. And that's perfectly fine. But when you get into the realms of PC and being your first attempt at it, I didn't think that they would actually be able to keep up with either AMD or Intel. And to my surprise, and I'll say it again, to my surprise, I really didn't think that Apple, in any way, shape, or form, could keep up with the likes of Intel and AMD, especially being new to the game. And, you know, as I don't really like saying it, but as an influencer and a small business owner where I'm basically doing everything, I again I was very surprised. Doing DaVinci, doing my color code or my color grading, doing my Photoshop editing, as well as Lightroom, and using all these programs at once, because I jump back and forth. I generally don't have enough time to close out the application, open up another one. I want everything right and relatively easy, or I want the access to be there. So I keep these programs open. I just jump to desktop, playing around with what I need it to do while this video is rendering, going to Lightroom, editing a couple photos, getting the thumbnails ready, getting everything ready as that is still rendering out. And to my surprise, most of the time, I don't get the editing done by the end of the render. Most of the times, these videos only take me about maybe 2-3 minutes to render. I barely even have time to go get something to drink. By the time I come back, it's fully rendered. It's fully ready to go. It's time for it to upload, and I'm just like, wow. Even the gigabit internet with gigabit Ethernet port that's on it, I was actually very surprised that it could keep up with my gigabit Ethernet or gigabit internet. I don't know why it's so hard for me to say gigabit, but just another caveat of being, midnight and me recording this, but whatever. But yeah, no, I was actually very surprised. As game developers, if it was up to me, I'd stay with my PC, I'd stay with Intel and doing all stuff like that. But because I'm releasing or trying to release on Apple and having to be forced to get a MacBook or Mac Mini or something in the Mac OS, ecosystem, I'm very surprised. The M1 chip, as of my knowledge, is available in all their devices at this point. I don't know if it is in the iPhone or not, but I know that their press conference, they talked about it. It was going to be in the Mac. What is it? The iMac. It is also now in the iPad. So, yeah, no, that chip is just it's jam at this point. And again, if it was up to me and I would have to recommend it, I would recommend it to everyone. I think I'm favoring it a little more than I am Intel, and that's not hard to do, but it's very powerful for what it is, especially for the cost. I would go with it in a heartbeat, and all of them have about the same performance. It doesn't matter what form factor you get. It just, depending on the form factor, is what equates to how powerful it's actually going to be. Obviously, my Mac Mini is not going to be as powerful as the MacBook Pro because they can add more coolers, they can add more bigger fans in there. So obviously, the cooling factor will determine the performance. And with that one, what do you guys feel about the M1 chip? Do you guys feel that it's a dud? Do you guys like it? Would you recommend it to your friends? And with that one, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.